The Galactic Council citadel was built to intimidate. It floated above the blue-white glare of a neutron star, its layered rings rotating at mismatched speeds, as if motion itself were a warning. Every species that entered it felt small by design. Dr. Elias Rowan had visited before, yet the place still pressed against his chest like a held breath. The children noticed it immediately. They walked beside him in a single line, shoes barely touching the polished floor. Gravity was calibrated for larger bodies, their steps came a fraction too light, a fraction too slow. Elias adjusted his pace without thinking. He had learned that long ago, match them, not the other way around. "Is this where they vote?" the smallest girl asked. Her badge read Mira Patel, age 9. "Yes," Elias said. "This is where they talk." Mira frowned. "Talking feels louder here." Elias allowed himself a thin smile. "That's because it matters." Ahead, the chamber doors parted without sound. Inside waited the council, 12 figures arranged in a crescent, each framed by holographic sigils of law and authority. Some were armored. Some were soft-bodied. All were watching. High Arbiter Karzun sat at the center, elevated slightly above the others. His species resembled layered stone animated by heat, mandibles folding and unfolding with slow precision. His eyes, too many of them, fixed on Elias. "Dr. Rowan," Karzun said. "You arrive punctually. An admirable habit." Elias inclined his head. "We try to be respectful guests." A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Elias felt it like static on his skin. The children were guided to a low platform at the chamber's edge. No restraints. No chairs. Just a marked boundary glowing faintly on the floor. Elias stopped when a guard extended an arm across his path. "Human representative only," the guard said. "They're with me," Elias replied calmly. "They are subjects," Karzun corrected. "You may observe." Elias looked at the guard's arm. It stood too close to the children, the joints angled inward, blocking space rather than protecting it. He noted the detail and filed it away. "As you wish," Elias said. He stepped forward alone. The chamber lights dimmed slightly. A legal recording glyph activated overhead, spinning once before locking into place. That alone tightened Elias's shoulders. Records meant permanence. "Today," Karzun announced, "we address concerns regarding human integration protocols. Specifically, the alleged unpredictability of your species' young." Elias did not react. "Human children are non-combatants under council law." "Under tradition," Karzun said. "Not statute." A few counselors shifted. Elias caught the movement in his peripheral vision. "Tradition exists because statute failed," Elias replied. "The first rule was agreed upon unanimously." "Agreed upon," Karzun echoed. "But never tested." Silence followed. It stretched, deliberate and sharp. Elias chose his words carefully. "Some things are not tested because the outcome is known." Karzun's mandibles flexed. "You speak as if your kind holds a monopoly on consequence." "No," Elias said. "Only on response." The chamber hummed faintly as translation matrices adjusted. Elias sensed it then, a subtle shift in the ambient field. Not hostile. Not yet. Just attentive. A counselor to the left leaned forward, its voice layered with harmonics. "Explain why the presence of your young is necessary, Doctor." "Because they are the point," Elias said. "The exchange program exists to prevent fear from becoming policy. You don't learn restraint by discussing it. You learn it by practicing it." Karzun gestured toward the children. "And you practice by placing them here. Exposed." "They are protected," Elias said. "By what?" Karzun asked. Elias met his gaze. "By us." A murmur spread, quickly suppressed. Karzun raised a clawed limb, and the sound died. "You misunderstand," the Arbiter said. "Protection implies authority. Here, authority is ours." Elias felt the words settle like a weight. He glanced toward the children. Mira was watching him closely now, her earlier curiosity replaced by something sharper. "High Arbiter," Elias said, keeping his tone level, "before this proceeds further, I must formally remind the Council of the first rule." Curzon tilted his head. "State it for the record." Elias inhaled once. "Human children are never to be harmed, threatened, detained, or used as leverage in any interstellar action. Violation constitutes an existential breach." The recording glyph pulsed, capturing every syllable. "Existential," Curzon repeated softly. "Such dramatic language." "It is precise," Elias said. Curzon leaned back. "Doctor, do you know why your species was invited into this council at all?" "Because isolation failed," Elias answered. "For everyone." "No," Curzon said. "Because your restraint was impressive. You could have dominated. You chose compliance." Elias allowed a pause. "Restraint is not submission." A guard shifted. Another stepped closer to the platform. Elias turned his head slightly. "Please don't do that." The guard froze. Curzon watched, intrigued. "You see threats everywhere," the Arbiter said. "No," Elias replied. "Only lines." Curzon raised a claw. The guard placed a hand on the glowing boundary. Mira flinched. "High Arbiter," Elias said quietly, "that is close enough." "Or what?" Curzon asked. Elias did not raise his voice. "Or this becomes something you cannot vote your way out of." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the boundary brightened, hardening into a faint barrier. The children were enclosed, not restrained, but contained. Myra's voice trembled. "Sir?" Elias turned toward her. His expression softened instantly. "You're all right," he said. "Stay still." "Are we in trouble?" she asked. Elias hesitated. "Just long enough." "No," he said. "You're the reason there won't be any." Behind him, the recording glyph shifted color. Deep in the Citadel's systems, a status flag changed state. It was small. Administrative. Easy to miss. In the Sol system, something dormant opened its eyes. The council chamber remained silent, but the silence had changed. It no longer waited. It counted. The barrier around the children shimmered, then stabilized into a translucent wall. It hummed softly, a sound too gentle for what it meant. Elias felt it in his teeth. "This is unnecessary," he said. High Arbiter Curzon did not look at him. "This is procedure. Containment is not observation." "It is caution," Curzon replied. "Your species inspires it." Elias turned slowly, keeping his hands visible. "You asked for integration. You approved this program. These children are not variables. They are data," a counselor said, voice thin and metallic. "Untested data." Myra's fingers brushed the barrier. It resisted with a faint pulse. She pulled her hand back, eyes widening. "Sir," she whispered. Elias stepped closer to the platform. "Don't touch it," he said gently. "Just breathe." Curzon's attention sharpened. "You instruct them as if they are in danger." "They are," Elias said. The Arbiter's mandibles clicked together once. "No harm is being done." "Intent precedes harm," Elias replied. "Every time." The recording glyph brightened, registering the exchange. Somewhere within the Citadel's layered systems, permissions cascaded. Elias felt the change like pressure shifting before a storm. A new figure entered the chamber, an adjudicator drone, spherical and polished, its surface etched with rotating sigils. It hovered near the barrier, sensors sweeping across the children. "What is that?" Mira asked, her voice steady despite the question. "A listener," Elias said. "It measures stress responses." "That won't be necessary," Elias added, louder. "It will be brief," Curzon said. "We are calibrating expectations." The drone emitted a low tone. Not painful. Not loud. Just persistent. The children stiffened. Elias watched their shoulders rise, the way training tried to assert itself over instinct. "Stop," Elias said. Curzon raised a claw. The tone shifted, modulating into something sharper. Mira squeezed her eyes shut. Elias did not shout. He stepped forward until the barrier blocked him, palms flat against the field. "This is a violation," he said, each word clean. "End it now." "Or?" Curzon asked. Elias met his gaze. "Or you learn why this rule exists." The arbiter studied him, then gestured. The tone intensified. One of the older boys clenched his jaw, a faint whimper escaping despite himself. "That's enough," Elias said. The drone adjusted again. A flicker crossed Myra's face, confusion, then anger. She struck the barrier with the heel of her hand. The field flared. The reaction was immediate. The nearest guard lunged, shock baton activating in a snap of light. Elias moved without thinking. "No." The baton struck the barrier instead of flesh. Energy arced, feedback surging back along the weapon. The guard cried out, dropping it. The chamber erupted in noise. Counselors rose from their seats. Systems flared red, then amber. Mira stared at the fallen baton, then at her own hand. "I didn't mean to," she said. Elias turned on Curzon. "Stand down, your security." They acted defensively, Curzon snapped. "Your child displayed aggression." "She reacted to pain," Elias said. "As any sentient would." "Then perhaps your species is unsuited for controlled environments," a counselor said. Elias laughed once. It was quiet. Hollow. "You built a room around a neutron star and call it controlled." The drone hovered uncertainly, its tone wavering. Curzon signaled, and it withdrew slightly. "Doctor," the arbiter said, voice tightening, "you overstep." "I warned you," Elias replied. "Formally." "On record." Curzon leaned forward. "You invoke tradition as shield and threat. But law is written by those who endure." Elias's gaze flicked to the recording glyph. "So is history." A sharp chime echoed through the chamber. A system notification, rare in this space. Several counselors stiffened as their personal interfaces lit. Elias felt it then. The silence had weight now, not absence. A held breath across light years. "Proceed," Curzon said, more sharply than before. The drone returned, its sensors narrowing. This time, it emitted no sound. Instead, the barrier constricted slightly, pressure increasing. Not crushing. Testing. Mira gasped. Elias's composure fractured. "Release them." "This is calibration," Curzon insisted. "We must understand thresholds." "You're measuring the wrong thing," Elias said. "And you know it." A counselor spoke, voice shaking despite modulation. "High Arbiter, perhaps we should recess." Curzon did not look away from Elias. "We will not appear weak." The pressure increased again. One of the children cried out, a sharp, involuntary sound. Elias felt it like a blade. "Stop," he said, voice low. "This ends now." Curzon hesitated. "Just a fraction." That was when it happened. A fault, minor, correctable, rippling through the barrier's field matrix. A spark jumped. The edge of the platform scorched. Mira stumbled, skin scraped, a thin line of red appearing on her palm. Blood fell onto the council floor. The chamber froze. Elias stared at the drop, bright against the polished surface. The first rule had not been poetic. It had been exact. Curzon's eyes widened. "Seal the chamber," he barked. The doors slid shut. Elias did not move. His voice was very calm. "You've crossed it." Curzon straightened. "This was an accident." "Accidents are still breaches," Elias said. And this one has witnesses. The recording glyph pulsed violently, shifting to a deep, warning hue. Doctor, Curzon said, a note of urgency creeping in, we can resolve this internally. Elias shook his head once. You just made it external. Mira looked up at him, tears streaking her face but her voice steady. Sir, what happens now? Elias knelt, ignoring the barrier as it dissolved at last. He took her uninjured hand, careful, grounding. Now, he said, you go home. Across the void, a long-unused authorization key turned green. And the galaxy began to realize that restraint had never been its shield. The council chamber did not explode into chaos. That was the first mistake. Silence returned, heavier than before, as if the citadel itself were holding still to understand what had changed. Elias stood between the children and the council, his jacket folded around Myra's scraped hand. The barrier was gone. The damage remained. Curzon's voice cut through the stillness. Medical units. Now. They did not arrive. A faint chime echoed instead. Not an alarm. A confirmation tone. Several counselors shifted uneasily as their interfaces refreshed without command. Star maps flickered. Trade routes dimmed, then vanished entirely, as if erased by an unseen hand. What is this? One demanded. Elias straightened. Containment review, he said. Human standard. Curzon's mandibles tightened. You have no authority here. Elias met his gaze. You forfeited it when you sealed the doors. The Citadel's lights adjusted, subtly rebalancing power flow. External communications blinked offline one by one. No warning. No declaration. Just absence. A counselor whispered, we're losing beacon control. Another replied, navigation locks are overriding council keys. Curzon turned sharply. Restore them. A technician tried. Failed. Tried again. Failed faster. Elias knelt beside the children. Stay close, he said. We're leaving. The doors did not open at his command. They opened anyway. Beyond them waited no soldiers, no weapons. Only a corridor cleared of personnel, lights guiding the way outward. Emergency arrows pulsed in human blue. Curzon stared. You planned this. No, Elias said. We prepared for you. A low-frequency tremor rolled through the citadel. Structural, not violent. Systems reconfiguring under superior priority. A counselor rose, voice trembling. High Arbiter, ancient archives are unlocking. Human designated. Curzon spun back. Block them. They're broadcasting, the counselor said. To everyone. The air filled with holograms, grainy footage, old and unmistakably human. Fleets burning. Worlds darkening. A voice narrated calmly, clinically, explaining response curves and escalation thresholds. This was classified, Curzon whispered. It still is, Elias replied. You just qualified. The footage ended on a single line of text, translated into every known language. This is why we asked for the rule. Curzon's posture collapsed inward. You could have ruled us. We still could, Elias said. That's the point. Another tremor passed through the floor. This one carried fear. All external trade is frozen, a counselor said. Even neutral systems. Temporary, Elias said. Until custody is transferred. Custody of what? Curzon asked hoarsely. Elias gestured around the chamber. This institution. The council's sigils flickered, then dimmed. Authority markers unraveled, replaced by a single emblem, a human hand, open. The children watched in silence. Mira squeezed Elias's fingers. Are they in trouble? Elias considered the question. They're being stopped. Curzon sank back into his seat. You dismantle us without firing a shot. Elias nodded. Violence teaches the wrong lesson. A soft tone sounded near the doors. Human evacuation personnel appeared, unarmed, calm, efficient. They moved directly to the children. Mira hesitated. "Sir?" "I'll be right behind you," Elias said. She nodded and went. Curzon watched them leave. "What happens to us now?" Elias turned. "You continue. Without jurisdiction over anyone's children. And if we resist?" Elias's expression remained gentle. "Then you learn what restraint looks like when it's withdrawn." The Arbiter bowed his head. "The first rule has been amended," Elias said. "It now applies universally." The Citadel shuddered one final time as control finalized. Systems stabilized. Panic receded into stunned comprehension. Elias walked toward the exit. Behind him, the Council sat in silence, no longer rulers, merely survivors of their own mistake. At the threshold, Elias paused. "For the record," he said, without turning, "we never warned you twice." Then he followed the children home. The evacuation vessel detached without ceremony, sliding away from the Citadel as if relieved to leave it behind. Elias stood at the viewport while the children settled into their seats, voices low, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline. The neutron star's glare softened as distance grew, its violence reduced to light. Elias exhaled for the first time since entering the chamber. Survival felt strange without triumph. Humanity had not roared. It had simply stepped aside and let consequence arrive on schedule, precise and complete, without spectacle, apology, or hesitation, leaving a galaxy to reckon with the absence of its assumed authority. Mira approached quietly, her hand bandaged, her expression thoughtful. "Is it over?" she asked. Elias knelt to meet her eye level, choosing honesty without burden. "The dangerous part is," he said. "What comes next takes longer." She considered this, then nodded, accepting complexity with a calm that unsettled him. Children learn faster than councils. Around them, medical staff moved efficiently, documenting injuries that should never have existed. Each report transmitted carried more weight than any declaration of war, because it required no interpretation, only acknowledgement. Across the stars, the broadcast continued to ripple. Trade networks recalculated priorities. Alliances rewrote charters overnight. Species that had deferred to the Council found themselves suddenly autonomous, frightened by freedom yet relieved by it. No human fleet appeared on borders. No weapons tested the dark. Instead, navigation lanes reopened under neutral oversight, carefully supervised by systems that favored stability over dominance. Economies adjusted. Markets trembled, then steadied. The galaxy discovered that order did not require a throne, only accountability and memory strong enough to prevent convenient forgetting ever again. Within the Citadel, Curzon remained seated long after the chamber emptied. Authority had evaporated, leaving architecture without purpose. He reviewed the footage again, pausing at the moment the blood touched the floor. Not the injury, the hesitation beforehand. That fraction of time held everything he had misunderstood. He had believed fear maintained peace. Humans had believed responsibility did. The difference was now permanent. When the Arbiter finally rose, it was as a private being, unshielded by tradition, tasked with rebuilding trust in a universe no longer impressed by titles. Elias met with Earth's Oversight Council hours later, the connection crisp and impersonal. "Children accounted for," he reported. "Psychological aftercare in progress." A voice asked if escalation was required. "No," Elias said. "De-escalation achieved." Another voice asked about precedent. "Set," he replied. Silence followed, approving and heavy. Protocols reverted to dormant states, not erased, merely sleeping. Humanity did not celebrate. It archived. Lessons were logged, reviewed, and locked, ready only if memory failed somewhere else again. The children slept during the return transit, dreams flickering behind closed eyes. Elias walked the aisle, adjusting blankets, grounding himself in small acts. He understood now why restraint exhausted them. It demanded vigilance without release. violence was easier. Mercy required maintenance. When Mira stirred, he paused. "Thank you," she murmured, half awake. "For staying." Elias swallowed. "Always," he said. The promise carried weight far beyond one ship, one incident, one rule rewritten by necessity rather than ambition. News feeds across the galaxy framed the event cautiously. Analysts spoke of systemic correction, of lawful intervention, of humanitarian oversight. None mentioned fear. None mentioned power. That omission mattered. Humanity had not needed to announce superiority. It had demonstrated a boundary and withdrawn. Other species began revising their own doctrines, quietly adding clauses about protection, consent, and irreversible harm. Not because humans demanded it, but because the alternative had become unthinkable, a risk no civilization wished to inherit through arrogance or neglect. Weeks later, a revised charter circulated. The first rule appeared in expanded form, stripped of qualifiers, broadened beyond species. Children. Noncombatants. The defenseless. Violations triggered immediate neutralization of authority, not retaliation. The clause was signed quickly. No votes contested it. Memory remained fresh. Elias reviewed the document, then closed the file. Paper mattered less than practice. Rules lived only when honored without witnesses, tested daily by choices made far from chambers and stars meant to intimidate visitors into obedience. On Earth, the children were welcomed without fanfare. Families embraced them. Counselors listened. Life resumed, altered but intact. Elias watched from a distance, satisfied and weary. Humanity had not changed the galaxy by force. It had clarified it. The lesson would echo unevenly, imperfectly, but it would echo. Somewhere, someday, another council would consider crossing a line and hesitate, recalling a quiet day when nothing exploded and everything shifted anyway. Elias returned to his work, documenting risks, advising patience, teaching restraint as discipline rather than weakness. He never used the phrase warning again. It was unnecessary. The galaxy understood now. Some rules existed because breaking them ended conversations permanently. Others endured because someone once chose care over conquest and proved that silence, properly wielded, could be louder than war and far more difficult to ignore forever.